representatives. They always come, they always have a specific mission. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura, his specific mission was to revive the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and rescue everyone from the confusion. So he said, the inner life of such a liberated, an eternally liberated, realized soul can never really be fully understood. Their inner life can only be traced through their writings, in which their deep realizations and their personal ecstasies are revealed. So as far as words can describe them, this was especially true of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. He wrote so many amazing books where he revealed his personal experiences of Krishna and his devotion for Krishna and his love for Krishna. And he made tremendous efforts to communicate Lord Chaitanya's message through his books, his magazine publications, his personal door-to-door preaching, his many public addresses and lectures. And he was such an amazing devotee that he was justly honoured as the 7th Goswami. The 6 Goswamis celebrated. 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, etc. So he was justly honoured as the 7th Goswami, due to his writings, his amazing spiritual realizations, which are said by the Acharyas to be equal on the level of that of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. We know were the principal disciples of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually specifically empowered them to write so many books. So, just tracing back a little bit on his life, when he grew up, in his school years, he always excelled in his schoolwork. He is a brilliant scholar, always winning medals of honour for his brilliant scholarship. And during his university years, he developed a great talent as a philosopher and debater. And actually it is said that during this time at university he became fascinated by theism and devotion to God. And he studied many books on the science of God and religion, and he became incredibly well versed in so many different philosophies and religions, the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, and also even the works of the famous, Western scholars and philosophers. So he was incredibly well read and well versed in all the current philosophies of the world. And during his university years, he went on pilgrimage to the holy places of Vrindavan, Mathura, Orissa, and what he was noticing was the younger generations of, the people born in Brahmin families and Vaishnava families. The younger people, he noticed, were turning their backs on their spiritual traditions. So, although Bhaktivinoda Thakura is an eternal associate of the Lord, at this time in his life, by Krishna's special yogamaya potency, you could say, at this time in his life, he wasn't conscious of the fact that he was a part of the Lord's plan to re-establish the pure teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He wasn't even conscious of what pure, genuine Vaishnava Dharma was. Actually, he even seemed a little bit bewildered. At a glance, he appeared to be just like a typical Bengali intellectual, a product of the British education system, and Calcutta literary scene, a student of European philosophers. And this is why so many mundane scholars, they misunderstand and they misrepresented him in their writings when they try and write about his life and his activities. Actually, there was one man, after Bhaktivinoda Thakura had passed away, he came to Bhaktisiddhanta. He was Bhaktivinoda Thakura's son. And he said, "Oh, I knew your father. He was a great personality, so influential, so popular, everyone loved him. He had an incredible ability to, he was a high court magistrate. He was in so many ways. So he was glorifying Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Like this, he said, "You're saying, oh, I knew your father." Bhaktisiddhanta said to him, "You didn't know my father." You think you knew him, but you didn't know him. You didn't know his inner life, his real personality, his real spiritual identity beyond this external. So Srila Prabhupada explains that sometimes, actually what happened is even some devotees were a bit bewildered about this. How Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he's an eternal associate of Lord, how was he a bit bewildered, or he didn't really understand things as they are. And Prabhupada explained to them that sometimes even liberated souls, like Arjuna, play the part of a conditioned soul. Just so Krishna can enlighten them, just like Arjuna, Krishna came and he played the part of a conditioned soul, and Krishna came and enlightened him and spoke the Bhagavad Gita. So these things, Prabhupada explained to them, are conducted by Krishna in terms of place, audience and time. And actually in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada quoted this verse that the activities of the pure Vaishnava cannot be understood even by great scholars. So we have to ultimately understand everything through the transcendental by-medium of the spiritual master. So Prabhupada explained, whatever Bhaktivinoda Thakura did was just to suit time, place and circumstances. There's no contradiction in his activities. And ultimately it's only by Lord Chaitanya's mercy that one can fully understand the nature of a pure devotee, of one who's actually situated in pure love of God. But Srila Prabhupada, he concluded that we should always simply understand that Bhaktivinoda Thakura was never a conditioned soul of this world, even though he may appear to be. That his spiritual, eternal spiritual identity was that of Kamala Manjari, one of the young Manjaris, the maidservants of Radha and Krishna and Garuda. In the spiritual world, Shri Radha and Krishna and Garuda Vrindavan are eternally served and worshipped by the 8 principal gopis and their assistants. And their assistants of these 8 principal gopis. And those 8 principal gopis are actually direct expansions of Srimati Radharani. And their assistants are these young, like 10 to 14-year-old manjaris. And they had beautiful forms like Srimati Radharani. And they had very specialized services to the divine couple. And they're very, very dear to Radha and Krishna. So one of these manjaris, Kamala Manjari, she was sent here to this planet Earth to revive the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that was Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So this Kamala Manjari, who had to carry out this important mission on behalf of the Lord. So at the age of 30 years old, in 1868, he was appointed deputy magistrate. By Krishna's arrangement, he was transferred to a new district where Vaishnava traditions, were very strong. And it was here that he received his first copy of Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he developed a sincere desire to fully understand the essence of pure Vaishnava Dharma. And he prayed to the Lord with great humility. And what happened? In a very short time, the Lord reciprocated with him, with his prayers. And he just lifted this, you could see this Yogamaya covering of his pure devotee. And as a direct result, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's natural spiritual character just began to emerge. And within a short time, he was actually manifesting all the symptoms of a liberated soul. So we can understand that Krishna had hidden this Mahabhagavat devotee from the world. So now the covering was removed. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's great mission for reviving Lord Chaitanya's movement was about to begin. And we could say, what better person could have been chosen for the job to preach to the intelligentsia of the day? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a person, he was fully conversant with all burning issues and philosophies of the day. He was fully conversant in all the different scriptures. He had a very substantial intellectual background, respectable social origins. He was well studied in all languages of the world, philosophy. He was a pure devotee. He was also a deputy magistrate, a recognized, respectable figure whose opinion would be seriously heard and whose footsteps others would follow. I mean, he was just, the perfect person to revive with the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And during this time, he would spend days and nights reading, writing, studying, and then he began lecturing. And he was a very powerful lecturer, very expert, he was a genius. And actually he was attacking, because he was attacking the Christians, the modern intellectuals who were giving imperfect opinions about Vaishnavism and Vedic literature. And he was so expertly cutting the illusions and attachments and misconceptions of the conditioned souls. But at the same time, he was so expert at presenting the truth so palatably, so poetically and wonderfully, that all the hearers, they weren't offended. They were simply pleased. They were just, he started having a very profound influence on so many different people. During this historical period in India, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was trying to preach Krishna consciousness, but he had a lot to contend with in his struggle to establish these pure original teachings of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Sanskrit and India's classical literatures were taken out of the schools established by the English, and all those students who were trained in British schools and universities, they began supporting their British lecturers. And their British lecturers were teaching that the Vedas, the Puranas, were simply fascinating collections of mythological tales that have nothing to do with reality. That all this Vaishnava culture is backward, old-fashioned. And there's also so many so-called Indian reformers and deviant Sahaja groups concocting their own philosophies and religions and misleading so many people. So despite all these incredible obstacles, basically there was just this massive stupidity and confusion. And despite all these obstacles, Bhaktivinoda Thakura was enormously successful in his work. And of course his work was carried out by his son, Bhaktisiddhanta. So in 1871 he moved to Jagannath Puri. He became deeply immersed in studying and writing. He became well versed in all the Vaishnava philosophies. And in Jagannath Puri almost every night he would go to the Jagannath temple to hear and chant and associate with the Vaishnavas. He would lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam. He would visit various holy places in Puri and spend time there, chanting and hearing. In Jagannath Puri, his heart was just filled with deep spiritual sentiments. He became just totally absorbed in remembering the wonderful pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And actually, here in Jagannath Puri, he wrote 100 books. Actually, there was one pastime, I remember. One time he was giving a class there in the evening. And suddenly, the king of Puri arrived with all his associates and, a bit of an entourage and people, and they just stormed into the temple making all this noise and, it's like in India, a very noisy place. And suddenly Bhaktivinoda Thakura stood up and addressed the king, and he said, "Excuse me, sir, but this is the temple of Lord Jagannath, and we're here having a Srimad Bhagavatam class, and you should show some respect. This is Lord Jagannath. Actually, you may be the king of Puri, but actually Lord Jagannath is the real king and monarch of Jagannath Puri." He really put him in his place, and the king actually was apologizing. He started apologizing. They started quieting him down. So here in Puri, he wrote so many books, 100 books. Generally if a scholar can write 5 or 6 books, or 3 or 4 books in his whole life, he's considered an accomplished writer. Bhaktivinoda Thakura wrote 100 books. Srila Prabhupada wrote 60 books. So to achieve this incredible feat, he followed a very strict discipline, daily routine. He was never idle. He had like a real strict schedule. He would take rest in the evening at about 7:30 to 8 p.m. Then he'd wake up at 10 p.m., which means he only slept maybe 2.5 hours. And then he'd write his books right through the night from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. And then he would take half an hour's rest. Then he would chant japa from 4:30 to 7 a.m. He was really against inattentive chanting. It's not that he had his japa bead in one hand and his mobile phone in the other hand. Actually, it is said that he would go into this pantry, he'd sit inside this little room with the Maha Mantra written up on the wall, and he would just sit there for 2 hours and just really focus on his chanting. So he would chant from 4:30 to 7 a.m. and then he would answer letters from 7 to 7:30. Then he'd study from 7:30 to 8:30. Then from 8:30 to 9:30 he'd receive guests. Because so many people used to come to visit him, including, viceroys and English government officials and devotees and different scholars. So many people. And if there was no visitors, he would just continue reading to 9:30. Then he'd rest briefly from 9:30 to a 15-minute rest. Then he'd take his bath, and then he'd take his breakfast. And he always had, for breakfast, 1 pint of milk, 2 chapatis, and some fruit. And then at 9:55, he'd put on his uniform and he'd leave in his carriage to go to the court. And as a magistrate, he wore coat and pants. But on his neck he had 6 strands of large tulsi beads, his shaved head, and a large sika. The English weren't really so happy about that, but he never cared for what everyone thought about it. And in court, he was so resolute in his decisions. He would decide a case immediately. And he wouldn't tolerate any upstarts or cheating or deception, things that go on in court. All the lawyers and Englishmen, they were just astounded by his work capacity. At 10 a.m. the court began, he would hear between 30 and 50 cases a day. And what took a normal magistrate, 1.5 hours to come to a decision, he would come to a decision in 5 minutes. And even if someone was trying to challenge him in court about his decision, he'd just dismiss them. So at 1 p.m. he went home, refreshed himself, he returned to court 2 to 5 p.m. And at 5 p.m. he would return home and he began his translating Sanskrit text into Bengali. Then 7 to 7:30 p.m. he'd take bath, he'd take his evening meal. 1 pint of milk, 2 chapatis and some rice. Even though he was a high court magistrate, and obviously, he had probably very highly paid, he had plenty of money, he lived actually the simplest of life. He practically had no personal possessions. He ate so simply and lived so austerely, just like a Goswami. And it is said actually he worked with a pocket watch. He was always on schedule. He was there to the second. Everything he did, every moment, utilising every moment, inspired by this intense desire to render devotional service to the Lord. And besides writing books, he wrote so many beautiful poems and songs and describing his state of ecstatic emotion and deep realizations. He was also writing many articles in his various popular magazines and journals that were circulating through different intellectual circles and the public circles. Actually, he began his own magazine, a very popular magazine that became very popular, called the Sajani Toshani. Actually, while he was in Jagannath Puri, the commissioner of Jagannath Puri was so pleased at having a person of Bhaktivinoda Thakura's caliber in his district that he asked him to watch over the affairs of the Jagannath temple. And Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he took up that responsibility. And he curbed many malpractices that were going on there. He made sure that worship was to the highest standard. And he would daily lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam. And actually he inspired hundreds and hundreds of people, so many people, to take up the process of devotional service. Even there was staunch Mayavadis and impersonalists he converted into Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, devotees of Lord Jagannath. And actually it was here in Jagannath Puri, because he realised, he's got such a huge mission, trying to spread this mission of Lord Chaitanya, that he prayed for a ray of Vishnu, a special sun that could assist him in carrying on his preaching work. Then in 1874, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared in answer to his prayer. And of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was also a Nityasiddha devotee, sent from Krishna's inner circle. Actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he was searching for a guru for a long time. Then one night, in a dream, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him that his guru was coming soon to initiate him. And sure enough, the next day he received a letter from this wonderful pure devotee who was a descendant of one of Lord Chaitanya's most intimate associates, who said in the letter, I will soon come to initiate you in accordance with Mahaprabhu's desire. So not long after this, Vipina Vihari Goswami came and initiated Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So soon after this, Bhaktivinoda Thakura and his wife, and at that time he had 2 children, he went and stayed in Vrindavan for 3 months. And there he met the what he used to call the commander-in-chief of the Vaishnavas, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji, who gave Bhaktivinoda Thakura so many spiritual instructions. Actually, he became like his Shiksha Guru. Then at the age of 47, Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he settled in Calcutta. He moved from Puri back to Calcutta, and he bought a home called the Bhakti Bhavan. By this time he had 10 children. And then he set up a printing press, and he called it the Chaitanya Press. And he began printing and publishing so many books. And it was also there that he was receiving all these guests and dignitaries and viceroys and so many people. And he during this time, actually, he was frequently troubled by bad health. But even though his health he was struggling at different times with his health, his determination to serve Krishna, it never diminished even slightly. It is said that he always accomplished the superhuman work of a spiritual genius, while simultaneously perfectly performing his material duties to the government and his family members. As I said, he was a transcendental Nityasiddha, eternally liberated soul. He was just truly the embodiment of all wonderful spiritual qualities. So although he was honoured and respected throughout Bengal and Bihar and Orissa, so many places, he didn't possess even the least shadow of vanity or pride. He was such an important person, and everyone recognized him, but he was just so meek and so humble. And although he held this practically the highest government posts, he was always just so humble and just a true kind friend to everyone. Now his sense of universal brotherhood made him a friend to all. Everyone just loved him so dearly. Sometimes, if you read his autobiography, sometimes he'd be transferred from the government would transfer him from one town, to another place, to another district. And every time he had to move, practically the whole town would come up and stage a protest. He actually endeared himself to everyone in the whole town and district so much that they were just feeling, the fact that he was leaving was just, they couldn't tolerate it. Men of all classes and creeds, and he was so charitable. If anyone approached him for help, and actually many people came to him for help, they never went away disheartened. He was so charitable, he would always give to everyone. And he never bore any grudges. Even those who were jealous of him or attempted to impede him in his spiritual mission, he never felt any grudges against them. He was always eager to benefit everyone. He never uttered a word that would injure another's feelings. He never chastised anyone unless he was perfectly confident that he had the right to do so for that person's benefit. And his administrative abilities was just marked by the English government officials and Indian kings. And he was frequently called in to settle conflicts. There was even some times when there was practically a revolution about to take place in India, or a war or a battle, and he would come, they would call him in, and just through his expertise he would resolve the conflict. And when he was offered honours and titles, he would he wouldn't accept any titles or honours. Because he told them that these titles and honours may interfere with his holy mission. And it was noted that there was never a man found more strict in observing moral duties than Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Actually, he had an absolute distaste for anything immoral. And this inspired many people to open their eyes and correct themselves in their daily life. He never drank tea, he never went to mundane theatres, he never ate betel. And as I said before, although he held this high government position as a deputy magistrate, he was very highly paid, he always kept his personal needs to a very bare minimum and lived the simplest of lives. And he had this incredible ability. He was expertly wrote so many books in a comparative manner, so as to bring the teachings of Lord Chaitanya into the relationship with almost every school of thought prevalent in the world. It means he made the sacred teachings of Lord Chaitanya fully available to every modern reader. And then at the age of 54 years, he went on a preaching tour, performing with a group of devotees. He was doing Nam, Sankirtan everywhere. He was organising this door-to-door preaching. Actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakura used to say that, used to call himself, used to say, I am the street sweeper of the Nam hut of Nitai. Because Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya, he instructed Nityananda to go out and preach door to door. And Nityananda was the founder of this Nam hut preaching. Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he took up this mission of Nityananda, and actually he established 500 Nam hut centres. A lot of centres. Nam hut centres where, people, they call their friends in, neighbours to their house, and then the devotee will go in there and do a class and give a chant. He opened 500 centres, and he was always very busy instructing disciples, initiating devotees, educating his, so many followers. And sometimes he would organise these huge Nam hut programs, just like they do in Mayapur. Sometimes they get all the Nam hut devotees come together and they have these big sanghas in Mayapur. So similarly, Bhaktivinoda Thakura, sometimes he'd gather together like 2,000 to 4,000 devotees from all these 500 Nam hut centres. And it is said that he would have these huge kirtans. Just imagine 2,000 to 4,000 devotees chanting and dancing wildly in ecstasy. Actually, some devotees told me, they have these big festivals in southern Europe, in the Ukraine and southern Russia. They get 8,000 devotees sometimes coming. And the kirtans are so ecstatic that sometimes the devotees start crying. I get in so much ecstasy. So as I said, when Bhaktivinoda Thakura had these huge festivals, he was invoking the original, you could say, the preaching mood of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And during these festivals, he would lecture very strongly, glorifying the holy name, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, explaining the uselessness of impersonal philosophy. And then in 1896, we know it was the birth year of Srila Prabhupada. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura actually predicted that year. He said very soon a personality will appear. He will preach and teach the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and move unrestrictedly all over the world with his message. So that time when Prabhupada was just about to take birth, Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he declared, he predicted it. So when he turned 70 years old, he accepted Babaji initiation. The Babajis, they just sit in one place and they just chant. So he accepted the Babaji initiation from Srila Guru Kushodas Babaji. And he put on an old loincloth and a begging apron of his beloved instructing spiritual master Jagannath Das Babaji. So he established a place there in Jagannath Puri. That place is still there. You go there when you're in Jagannath Puri. A place to do his bhajan. And it's a short distance from the Samadhi of Haridas Thakur. We go there. Devotees go to Jagannath Puri. When I was there, we all us devotees from Sydney, we went there to Jagannath Puri, and we all stayed in the Vira Mandir down near the beach. And every afternoon we used to meet up with Indraduna Swami and Gunagrahi Swami, and I think Ramai Swami was there, and the devotees. We'd all meet up at the ISKCON temple, and we'd travel, we'd go do big Harinam around Jagannath Puri, and we used to go to these places and have ecstatic kirtans in the Samadhi area, temple of Haridas Thakur, and we used to go and visit this little place, the Samadhi, this place where Bhaktivinoda Thakura used to do his bhajan. So he'd be in this little place in Jagannath Puri, and he would just be chanting, and he was still writing, and he was still accepting disciples at that time. And then he did that for 2 years. Then when he was like 72, he just began feeling a strong desire just to be fully absorbed in his own personal bhajan. So he just went into complete solitude. Didn't see anyone. And then he just became fully absorbed, just uninterruptedly engaged in meditation on his loving service to Shri Radha and Krishna in the spiritual world. And actually, during that time, he just entered into a deep state of total samadhi. It's like a spiritual trance. They'd say that in that state, physically they're there, but actually they're not there. So they're simultaneously still in the world, but they're actually in the spiritual world, serving the divine couple. Then at noon in 1914, at the age of 76, so he was there for like 4 years, just in total seclusion, just doing his bhajan like this, just going into these deep meditative trances. Then in 1914, at the age of 76, he just left the world and he just returned and took up his position there as the Manjari, serving the divine couple, Radha and Krishna, the spiritual world, the eternal pastimes of the Lord in the Lord of Vrindavan. Jai Shri Bhaktivinoda Thakura ki. That's very nice.
What year did Bhaktivinoda Thakura live?
Huh?
What year did you say?
In 1914. 1914. It's not that long ago. But yeah, amazing. So I think we're going to do some program today. We'll do a special Pushpanjali and sing some bhajans and do some readings. Then we'll have a little feast at lunchtime. If devotees can, they can try and fast half a day. If you can't fast, you can still, actually said you can drink water or eat fruit. Still considered technically fasting, or drink milk. If you can't do the full fast, that's only half a day. So I think maybe the program will start about 10 o'clock. Some bhajans and do some readings and then do the Pushpanjali, have kirtan. Jai Shri Bhaktivinoda Thakura ki. Shri Prabhupada ki.